So, we are here talking about mental health and understanding our mates. We're also aware that you might be here because you want to understand your mates, your family, or maybe yourself in your own journey. Let's go. All good. Okay, so mental health conditions, what do they look like? How are they presented? What are your images? When I say a mental health condition, what's the first thing you guys think of? Don't be shy.
Anxiety, depression.
Anxiety, depression are the first ones that come to mind? Yeah, totally. Yeah?
ADHD is another big one.
Yeah, and sometimes ADHD isn't in itself a mental health condition, but a lot of people who experience ADHD will experience mental health conditions because of trying to understand that condition.
Yeah, ADHD often can lead to anxiety and other things. So.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. Any other thoughts? Cool, let's go. So basically what we're talking about with mental health conditions is the outside might not be affected, but the inside is. So if I was to stand up here with a broken arm, if you wanted to make conversation with me, what would you say? What'd you do? How'd you break your arm? Who's broken a bone in this room before? How sick of telling the story? Oh wow, that's a bit gross. How sick of telling the story of what you did you get? A little bit. Was it a cool story and that's why you didn't mind?
Broke my nose.
Yeah, so you're still telling it. You love it. So, but you know, we know if someone's full of cold, now with COVID we get a bit of like, but we also, we know what's going on when something's wrong with the outside, right? When something's going on with the inside, and what makes mental health conditions so tricky is sometimes people don't know, so they don't know how to, that we might need a bit of extra support. You know, you see someone with broken arm at school, you might be like, hey, can I give you a hand with your books? If you're a good sort. Whereas you may or may not know that people in your class are struggling with depression or anxiety or other mental health conditions. And so that's the tricky part about this, is that it's hidden. Does that make sense? Yeah? Yeah. Cool. And mental health conditions are a valid health issue. Who at their school feels like if you go see the guidance counsellor, it's a bit of a thing, like you'd be hesitant to see the guidance counsellor? Yeah? Yeah, right? Often because everyone knows that that's their room too, so if you're walking in that direction or you're going through that door, then it's not a private experience often, hey. Often we also go, I don't know how unwell I need to be with a mental health condition before I get help. And my answer would be like, mental health conditions is like something we need to keep well, right? Not wait till we are absolutely done and desperate for help to get help. So it's a valid health issue. Things like we go to GPs for checkups, or maybe the better thing is we go to a dentist to get like your general cleanup. It's keeping that general health of our mental health in mind. And I feel like your generation, I'm 35, so in the 20 years since I was 15, since I was in year 10, I think that's a hell of a lot more valid. I think there's less stigma around mental health conditions, but there is still stigma there. Like there's still that self-consciousness about going to a guidance counsellor for most students. So it's just keeping in mind it's totally valid, you know. These are the most common mental health conditions, but they're certainly not the only mental health conditions. So depression, anxiety, addiction, which some people don't realise falls into mental health conditions, but it totally does. Eating disorders and self-harm. They're the most common experienced by young people as well, but there's lots of others. Does anyone know other mental health conditions that they want to put out? Yeah?
What's the personality disorder?
Yeah, it's generally called there's bipolar, borderline personality disorder. There's a few. Any others that people want to name? No? Yeah, cool. Okay, I want to show this video because just like how there is probably a million different ways to break bones in your body, There is a million different ways for how mental health conditions will show up in people's lives and what that experience will be like for them. So this is a clip from the UK of different people speaking about their experience of mental health conditions. So we're just going to watch through that now.
I was about 16 when I was diagnosed with depression. My doctors think that it stemmed from my parents divorcing and struggling with school, really.
It all started when my father died when I was at high school.
It all started in university during my final year.
It all started when I was 16. I came out of a relationship I was in at the time and I started purging and self-harming.
I first realised I had a mental health problem when I was 15. I was cutting myself every day and crying all the time.
Soon after the attack happened, I started to feel throes of anxiety, panic attacks started creeping in.
I first realised that I had a problem when I really wanted to stop all the things I was doing, but I just couldn't seem to stop no matter how badly I wanted to.
I was suffering from hallucinations, which at the time were really scary because I didn't know what was reality and what was my imagination.
At my worst, I felt like I was absolutely worthless, alienating and destructive, but with no help of recovery.
I felt like I had this black cloud hanging constantly over my head, and it's just a feeling that stays with you and you can't seem to get away from it at all, and you feel completely alone.
I felt like this was going to be it forever.
I felt as though I'd never reach any of my ambitions or my goals.
I felt like I was in my own bubble, hearing muffled voices of people around me.
When I had my first proper mental breakdown, and I decided to run away from home.
I felt like the world would be better off without me.
My mental health problem means that I go through many highs and lows which I struggle to control.
Sometimes I just want to hide away.
I feel that I have to make everyone else happy and every day is a struggle, but I just remind myself that I'm strong.
My mental health problem means that sometimes the world can be a very scary, very dangerous and very dark place.
Everyday tasks can become the most mammoth missions that seem like you're never going to be able to do them.
My mental health problem means that life is hard.
The hardest thing about having a mental health problem is people not realising that there's something wrong with you and that you can be really ill even if you look absolutely fine. I think especially having an eating disorder, people assume that you're going to look a certain way or be a certain size or a shape, or they imagine certain stereotypes that aren't necessarily true.
Like the social, and in my case like cultural stigma associated with it.
If I'm having a bad day, no matter how small it is, it feels like the whole world's crashing in on me and things just keep getting worse.
Just trying to get the people around me to understand what I'm going through when they haven't gone through something like me is probably the hardest thing.
Social situations in particular can be really difficult. I sometimes can't commit to what we'd call sort of normal everyday activities.
The word schizo, I think it has a lot of stigma attached to it. I really don't like it.
What really reassured me was knowing that there are so many other people out there who've got the same diagnosis as me and that I'm not alone.
Having my 2 rescue dogs to look after and to take care of, because I know that they need me around and they're always happy to see me, so no matter how bad my day is or how awful everything seems to be, I know that they need me and they always make me smile.
Having such a great network of friends, family and people who are out there who can help.
I'd look at how far I've come and everything that I'd gone through and realise that I am still standing.
It really helps seeing my friends treat me the way that they did 6 years ago before this all started. I was that happy, laid-back person, and that's the person that I want to be and aspire to be again.
It really helps me when people just treat me normally.
I'd like people to treat me like you would your own mother, I guess. I think that's a good way to treat people.
I don't want people to tiptoe around me.
I'd like people to treat me like any other normal person, but also just to be a bit more sensitive around me, not to be stigmatised, depression and everything, and telling me to cheer up and everything.
I wish I'd known how much I was going to grow and learn as I grew up and grew older. I wish I'd known how much therapy was going to help me and how much I was going to gain from that. And I wish I'd known that it was possible to meet people who would love me for all of me, including my mental illness.
that I didn't have to feel so alone, and that there was a lot of support out there.
That there are people out there and organisations that can help me.
I don't regret having mental health problems because it has made me who I am today.
I wish I'd known just what supportive people can be once you tell them what you're going through.
People are accepting. They're not going to walk down the street and cry, "You mental case." They're not going to, they're not going to do anything like that. Everyone's incredibly understanding. And if they're not,
So the best piece of advice I'd have to give would be just getting over that initial fear of coming out to people about your condition, because once you talk about it, it really does help.
The best piece of advice I ever got was to just focus on today. Because you can't change what's happened in the past, and there's honestly no real way of predicting what's going to happen in the future.
I know it's hard, but be yourself and be brave, and you will recover.
Take each day as it comes, and even if that's too much, break it right down to just 5 minutes at a time. I find that really helps.
Just ask for help. Just make that step and ask anybody, and they will be supportive for you.
Everybody has scars. Some people have them in the mind, and some people have them on legs, like I do.
Just basically be yourself. That's simple enough, and what it might be a bit cliche, but I guess it's true.
It's okay to be mental, and most people are, just not in the same way as you, but there are ways to get help.
Even if you think that things can't get better, that you've tried so many times and you've fed up and you've had enough of trying, things really can, and you can get better and you can recover. So don't give up on yourself.
You to turn to the person next to you, or join with a couple of other people, and talk about what's one thing you heard that you liked, what's one thing you heard that maybe was a new or like interest you or challenged you or something that stuck to you. So one thing you heard that you liked and something. And do you guys want to link in there? Okay. What was something you liked or something that piqued your interest in that you heard in that clip? Yeah.
Just that a few people said just to treat them normally. Well, that was pretty interesting.
Totally. What else?
I like how some people have scars, and some people have scars on their skin, some people have scars in their head, and people have like different kinds of scars.
Yeah, absolutely. So some people have scars on their skin, some people have scars on their head. Different, yeah.
I thought it was good how they talked about how it's not just the stigma or the stereotype, and it's more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because when we talk about just a stigma or a stereotype, we're minimising people's lives, aren't we? Like, these are people's lives, their experiences. When you have a mental health condition, it can be difficult. You are in your mental health condition, but it can be difficult to separate yourself from it. So when people talk about this thing over here and it's this, it's like, actually, hang on, this is more than that. Does that make sense? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. Anything else? No? Great. So who is impacted? And these statistics, 1 in 5 or 20% of Australians will experience a mental health condition in any year. So 1 in 5 in any year will experience some form of mental health condition, which is quite high. Do you think that's high, or are you surprised by it? Yeah? Just a little bit high. And the most reliable recent statistic we have, which is from 2016, so it's not recent at all, is that at least 45% of Australians will experience a mental health condition during their lives. Yeah.
You think that's gone up due to COVID?
I think COVID has been really challenging. Do you guys, you think that? Yeah. One of the strongest things, and normally I talk about this later, but I'll talk about it now because it's a really good point. One of the best things you can do for your mental health is to have good and healthy connections. And what's COVID done for us? Isolate us, right? Like literally ISO is a new slang for us. So COVID's definitely difficult. Who found homeschooling tricky?
I just sleep more, but it wasn't. It was you so much like.
We haven't had it yet.
You haven't had to do it yet, King Roy?
Just allowed to do whatever we want.
Has anyone avoided homeschooling, homeschooling or isolation or anything like that?
I had to go for like 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
For homeschool, and then like my dad's like, no, go to school.
Okay.
Because you're homeschooled, it's like you're behind on everything.
It's tricky to keep up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, it's nice. You like don't necessarily have to get to school every day. You can sleep a bit more. But that connection is so crucial. So yeah, I think COVID is having a significant impact on our mental health. The statistics on Kids Helpline are pretty full on. I think in one state they had a 100% increase in phone calls over a 6-month period in Victoria during Victoria lockdown, and in a year Australia-wide it was a 45 or 50% increase. So we are absolutely seeing people struggle more, and I think primarily 2 reasons. One, that lack of connection, more isolation, and then also that uncertainty and anxiety. We don't know when this is going to end. We don't know how long we're going to have to be in this space or how much it's going to affect our lives. So very real for us. But basically what this means, and I don't say these statistics to be like, the world sucks, everything's bad, doom and gloom. I say this to be like, this is so common. So common. More people will experience a mental health condition in Australia in their lifetimes than there are naturally blonde people in Australia, right? Do we have stigma around being naturally blonde? No. Mate, any stigma you've experienced with being naturally blonde?
Oh, just blonde jokes, but otherwise not.
Oh, actually, yeah, that was bad. I apologise. A lot of people spend a lot of money getting their hair blonde, so, you know, it can't all be, you know, there's a bit of... So I say that to be like, if this is so common, why the heck is there stigma? Why do we feel uncomfortable about getting support, right? This is more common than most like health conditions that, you know. I don't know the statistic on this, but I would guess that more people would experience a mental health condition in any year in Australia than would break bones. I don't think it would be 1 in 5 would break a bone in Australia each year. I could be wrong, but it's so common. 18 to 24 is the most common age group to experience mental health conditions. Why do you think that might be?
You're out of school.
Out of school?
Yeah.
And what? Yeah. Self-reliant? You got to rely on yourself? Yeah.
Like, as I said, more self-reliant, and then you've got a lot more exposure.
Yeah.
You're still learning how to deal with that kind of exposure.
Totally. Learning how to deal with the exposure. Yeah. And yeah.
You're becoming more independent and like less people you can talk to.
Sure. More independent, more isolated. Yeah.
Lots of connection with people, maybe, and with still especially at high schools, there's lots of resources, and you just lose the resources once you leave.
Yeah. Big time. So they're 2 of the biggest reasons, which is kind of touched on. So you go to school and you are surrounded by people. There is connection. Some people experience horrific bullying, so obviously that is not a protective factor. But for hopefully the majority of our students, they go to school and they're seen and known. Laura Otto in her talk yesterday morning said something that I thought was so powerful, and it said she said it's sacred to be known. And I 100% agree with her. It is a really healthy thing to be known. So next time you're at school and a teacher like says g'day rather than being annoyed, just like have a little gratitude moment that you're known. So you're at school, you're in a community, and you're known. There's a lot of eyes on you. You're in classes, so if your mood changes, someone hopefully will pick that up and be able to get support to you. You've got resources, guidance counsellors like we spoke about earlier, or hopefully other teachers you trust, and friends that you can reach out to that are there. So they're 2 of the other reasons. Another reason we haven't touched on, what kind of behaviours sometimes increase post-school? Yeah.
Like drinking, partying.
Yep.
Yeah. Which wasn't true, but drugs as well.
Yeah. So experimenting with drugs and alcohol. And who's aware that alcohol is a depressant? Yeah, most of you guys? That's great. When I was at school, that was not known. We just thought it was a stimulant. But alcohol is a depressant in itself. So we've got people going to uni for the first time or having freedom to party, and they're indulging in this depressant. So the mental health effect, it affects different people differently. Some people can experiment with drugs and alcohol and not have much impact on their mental health conditions. Other people, it can be really detrimental. Drugs, much harder to experiment safely with drugs. Marijuana, we talk about it being fairly safe and natural, but I have had to sit at the bedside of many students, male students particularly, over my 17 years of youth ministry because of the impact that marijuana's had on their mental health, generally because of the synthetics and chemicals that it's mixed with, but also there's a heck of a lot of research out there about the impact of marijuana on mental health, so just be mindful of these things. So for those, who's in Year 12 here? Couple? Yep. You guys are about to go into the high risk category. And this is the time where you just need to make sure you keep those connections. So when you're starting to think about finishing school, you've got like 6 weeks left or something, max, 4 weeks?
Less.
Your eyes are like, yeah. No, less. That's so exciting. Now's the time to start thinking about, well, how am I going to stay connected? What resources am I going to connect into if I need to? Who are my people I'm going to keep tuned in with to get through that time? What's my relationship with drugs and alcohol going to be? And how am I going to make sure that my experimenting with alcohol, particularly as a depressant when you turn 18, how am I going to make sure that I'm looking after my health? What's going to tell me that I'm doing this at a limit that's good for me and my mental health? Tricky thing about mental health conditions is quite often people experience multiple mental health conditions at the same time. So you would have heard even this morning in the couch talks, I think both the gents talked about experiencing depression and anxiety. That is very common. The tricky thing about this, does anyone know why this is really tricky when it comes to looking after our mental health? No? Depression and anxiety are two totally different health conditions that come about in our body for different physiological reasons, and they require different types of medication if you go down the medication route with mental health conditions. And so, and both can kind of counteract each other. So it can take quite a while for doctors to work with patients to get the right balances. So it can be tricky. And so sometimes you'll see someone who has been struggling with a mental health condition and they'll finally get help, and rather than getting better, they'll struggle more while they try and figure all of that out. But it is quite tricky. So it's good to be aware of that. Okay, I want to share a little bit of my story with you now. Has anyone seen these two floating around conference? Anyone bought any merch off my mum?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes she can be a little bit task orientated, so sorry about that. Nah, she's spectacular. My dad's a good man. And that's me and my 2 sisters. I grew up in Emmanuel community, which is where Ignite Youth comes from. Was at the first Ignite Youth conference. Isaac from this morning and I grew up together, same age, kind of went through it all. So I grew up in a really faith-filled family. Life was really good. I was a really happy kid. I was that kid who at Christmas would always put on my lap dancing costumes and put a show on for the family. Very extroverted. Anyone else like that? Anyone else? Yeah, Lauren's with me. Lauren feels it. Yeah, that was me. And life was good, life was sweet. I started to really flip in my mood, probably around year 7, year 8, as the hormones kicked in. So did, for me, mental health conditions. I would wake up some days just feeling super low, really teary, really emotional, and I wouldn't have a clue why. And I just wrestled with that early on. I didn't have a clue what it was about. And then probably end of year 8, year 9, I started to cope with that in an even unhealthier way. Girls' schools, there can be a little bit of drama if someone's not okay. What's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. And if you don't share what's wrong, then all of a sudden you're a bad friend. Has any girls had that experience? Maybe guys do that too. I don't think guys, do the guys do that? No, they don't care. They're like, you'll tell me, you want to tell me, right? And I didn't deal with that well. I started to lie to make up reasons of why I wasn't okay. And lying for me was that experience of you tell a lie and it rolls out like a tumbleweed that just catches more and more grass, and all of a sudden it's huge and you can't get it back. Has anyone had that experience before? Yeah? Yeah. It's a tricky one. So that was my experience. And then not only was I dealing with depression, I was also dealing with feeling like I was a horrible, horrible person. I had the emotions, and then all of a sudden now I had this thing in my life. It got to a point for me where I didn't believe that anybody, including God, would love me because of how I behaved to all my friends and family. And I ended up in hospital. I was really unwell. I didn't want to be here, basically. And a priest came to hospital. My family's super religious, and it was a Sunday, so they wanted a priest to come to see me to bring me the Eucharist. And this priest asked me if I wanted to go to the Sacrament of Reconciliation before he gave me the Eucharist. And I said yes. And for the first time in 18 months, 2 years, I was completely honest with somebody. I can say without a shadow of a doubt there was not a single person in my life I had not lied to at that point. And it was a little bit of a, I got nothing to lose here, all right? And I remember sharing with this priest all the lies, all the crap, and what he said to me in that moment was, there is absolutely nothing you can do to stop God from loving you. There's absolutely nothing you can do to stop God from loving you. And whilst I didn't fully believe him, there was a little bit of hope that took root in my heart that that could be true, that maybe God loved me. Maybe I could still be okay. He then said, I think maybe we should talk to your parents and be honest with them because you're going to need them. And so he sat with me while I told my parents that I'd been lying. A beautiful mother who sometimes can say the wrong thing at the wrong time. You know how some mums do that? Like they go into fixing mode, you're like, just listen. Sometimes someone does that. She's so beautiful. In that moment she said, I'm just so glad those things you said didn't happen to you and that you are okay and I love you. And my mum for me in that moment was God's love for me in that moment. So the hope that I was lovable, the hope that I hadn't completely stuffed up my life, that I could stick around and see how it turned out, just started to grow. And I was so grateful. This group of women at the bottom, they were my youth group girls. Isaac was one of the chaps around. So from when we were 14, we were kicking around together, and now we're 35, 36, and we're still kicking around together. And they just gave me so much love and support in that time as well. They were my connection. They were my space where I could be really unwell, because I was unwell still for quite a few years after that with my mental health. And then I put a lot of hard work in to get better. There was medication for quite a lot of years. A lot of those initial reasons for my depression was hormones, so we did a lot of work with the doctor and a psychiatrist to get right medications to get hormones sorted. And then I did cognitive behaviour therapy, all these things to kind of get me functioning a bit better. I managed to finish school, which was a pure miracle. Didn't do well, but I finished and got there. My family supported the heck out of me. And then what happened many, many years later was I also found out, or realised, became aware that there was a bit of trauma that I'd experienced as a child. And so then it was about 2 to 3 years of intensive trauma therapy too. So sometimes to stay mentally well takes a heck of a lot of hard work, but it is 100% worth it. Because what I would want to say to anybody who is either experiencing mental health conditions themselves and feels like they got no hope of getting better, they're just feeling like this is going to be their story, or if you've got a family member in that space, it's really difficult when parents struggle with mental health conditions and you're the child. There is absolutely freedom, and there is a way to be well. It takes a lot of work, and it takes maintenance, and it takes support, but there's absolutely a way to be well when you struggle with mental health conditions. I want you to hear that. Okay. So how do we help our mates? How do we see if there's something going on? We've got to be looking at them. Look for signs of anxiety and depression. Sometimes when people start acting a bit differently, we get insecure and we think it's us. We think they're off us, or we've done something wrong. Has anyone done that? You just presume it's you. Yeah, still do it, right? But maybe it's actually about them. So rather than just presuming it's you and you've offended them, just be like, hey, I just want to check in. Are you okay? I don't know if I've done something or if you're not okay, but I just want to see how you are. So just being aware. But when we talk about those signs of anxiety and depression, what are some of those signs you guys might already know? What are some of the signs you're aware of? Things you might see in your friends? Yeah, all the hands up. Just we're going to hear first.
Obviously talking about being anxious or cancelling last minute for plans or avoiding social situations.
Absolutely, yeah. And when people talk about being anxious, sometimes they'll just say something slightly like, oh, I feel a bit anxious. Like they're testing the water to see if you're going to respond to it, hey. And sometimes it's easy to miss. Yeah, great, thank you.
I was just going to say become distant from everything.
Yeah, distance themselves. Yeah.
Maybe like a sudden change in mood.
Mm-hmm. Yep, change in mood, absolutely.
Sometimes they're just different.
Yeah.
They act differently than they normally do. It doesn't have to be much of a change, but if it's noticeable enough, check in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any other signs you can think of? I think you did a pretty good job there. The withdrawing from sport and things that they normally love as well can be a big one. Yeah. Okay. Listen to your friends' experiences. You might feel like, well, I can't fix it, so I don't want to hear it because then I'll feel responsible. But your job with your mates at your age is just to listen. You absolutely don't have to fix it. You don't have to be the person that gets them better, but just to listen and just to hear there. And I'll give you some tools for how to do that in a minute. Talk about what's going on. Has anyone had the experience where they've told someone something painful and then that person's never asked them about it again? Getting a few nods. You feel pretty crappy about that, hey? You're like, I've just been really vulnerable with you and you've kind of held that moment, but now we're just going to pretend that never happened. But what I actually really want is you to ask me about that again. And they might just not talk about it again because it's fine, it's figured itself out, or they don't want to talk about it. But just ask, just check in. And seek help together. Like I said, it is not your responsibility at your age to fix them, to care for them, but for you to connect them in. So think about the trusted adults, whether it's in your youth group or your school community, where if someone kind of came to you and said they were going through something, who are the people you would connect them in with? Also ask them, who do you feel comfortable with? And do you want to go together or do you want to go on your own? The question I always get at the end of this, when we get to question and answers, is what do you do if they don't want you to tell anybody, but they're really not okay? Your mate, your family member. Tricky situation, right? What I would say is you do it anyway. This is really tough. You try and work with them to say, you need some support. I'm your mate and I'll listen, but I can't help you through this and I want you to be okay. And you get them some help. I would say most of the time that relationship survives. I've only heard of a couple of times where the friendship won't survive, someone breaking that confidence. but what it hopefully means is your friend survives, your friend's okay, and you're just putting their needs above your needs for that friendship. But it's a really tricky situation, and if you're faced with that, I would say talk to an adult anonymously about the situation to get some advice, to get some confidence on whether you should break their confidence or not. But it's not yours to carry, because I've seen a lot of young people who are helping someone who is experiencing mental health conditions, and because they're carrying too much for that person, they then start to experience mental health conditions. Have you guys seen that in your school with friends? Yeah. Yeah. Did you want to say something?
I know one of my mates, he went through a pretty rough time, and we were all pretty good mates with him, and he unloaded on us, and we basically told him to unload on us, and that ended up making things worse for all of us instead. So at some point we all just decided to strong arm him into going to the school counsellor's office, and he's been feeling better ever since.
Yeah, great. And how's your friendship with him now?
The friendship with him's still good. The rest of us are also going to the counsellor's office, A, to check if he's going, and B, because he's unloaded on us and now we need the counsellor as well.
Great. And that's a positive experience?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I love that. And sometimes that often happens. They won't want to go, they'll be resistant, and then they'll go and they'll be like, thanks, things are better, I didn't need that. Yeah, definitely. I want to share this video because this is what I was talking about, how to listen to someone. This video is by a woman named Brene Brown. It's an animation. It's talking about empathy. So listening closely, this is kind of like someone's not doing well. This is the how to hold that space for them, how to be there with them.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. I had it, yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
too, right? That last little bit of noise. What do you reckon? Have you had experiences where people have done that well for you and badly for you? Yeah? What happens when you get the sympathy response? What happens for you when someone's listening to you and they're like, oh, at least this, or yeah?
People are like, oh, damn, that sucks. And then they just leave. It really grates on you.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, it grates, right? Why do you think we do that? Why do you think we can be sympathetic and not empathetic? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you want to?
Oh, did you have your hand? No, yeah.
Sorry, I thought someone had their hand up there. Alright. We should probably edit that out. So, I think part of the reason we can be sympathetic more easily than we can be empathetic is we don't have to acknowledge ourselves. We only have to go, oh wow, that really sucks. And it's like, okay, job done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. And she talks about in that video as well, when we have to hold a space for someone when they're in pain, it kind of requires us to be aware of pain itself. And if we're living that life like a lot of us do, trying to avoid pain and discomfort and like just keep going and everything's good, like the Dory, just keep swimming whole thing, then sometimes if we get in touch with someone else's pain, we become aware of our own and we don't want to do that. We want to avoid it, right? And I understand that. But we cannot avoid pain in our lives. And when we can be vulnerable for others and hold space for them, and when we need it, we can be vulnerable and have space held for us. That's where that beautiful connection can happen, and we can experience some healing and wholeness. Okay, so I want to talk for a minute about what if it's you? What if you're the one who's struggling? Might not be now, might be in the future. You might have already struggled, but when we talk about 45% of Australians, then you know, a good chunk of us may or may not experience mental health conditions in our life. First thing, you are not insane, like we spoke about. This is totally common and normal. So you're not insane. This is just something you're experiencing. There's a reason why you're experiencing it. And get some support around you. You're not alone. Obviously, we talk about those numbers, you're not alone. You might feel like you're faulty, like someone's just fallen apart and gone kaput in your brain. But you're not alone, you can get support. Talk to someone you trust. I just want you to take a second to think about if you started to struggle, or you are struggling now, think about someone who you would go to. Who's the person you would first go to talk to get some support? When you thought of someone, just chuck your hand on your head. Yeah. And keep that person in mind. You can take your hands down now. If you couldn't think of someone in that moment, that's okay, but I want you to start paying attention, because I believe that God puts people in our lives. I believe that there would be somebody in your life that you could go to. And if there's not, and you don't have anybody and you're struggling right now, I'm one of the counsellors here at conference, and I'm happy to have a yarn and see if we can get some support around you. Stay connected. We've banged on about that a lot, right? That's pretty clear. It's probably like one of the number one things I want you guys to do to look after your mental health. If you don't know how to have a conversation with someone to say you're not doing well, or basically any conversations around mental health conditions, Beyond Blue is unreal. Has anyone ever checked out their website before? You might have had to do it for school or something like that. Yeah, they have every resource under the sun you could need around mental health in there. If you're not doing well, you can have a look at how to have a conversation to tell someone you're not doing well. They have 24/7 online counsellors by chat or by phone. If you're worried about a friend and you don't know how to talk to them or how to get support, there's stuff on there. It's excellent. It's a really good resource. A lot of the time, if it's your mates who are struggling, or you who's struggling, sometimes it can hit us when we're feeling our most lonely, which is often when everyone else is asleep, right? And we feel so isolated and we don't know how to reach out or who to reach out to. Jump on Beyond Blue. They're there. And sometimes it's helpful if you're not quite ready to tell somebody you actually know, that person you trust. Telling a stranger can get you used to like saying it. It's always so much easier to talk about something for the second time than it is for the first. Okay, and talk to a health professional. We talked about this when we spoke about it being a valid health condition. You got a cold, you do something about it. You're starting to experience a mental health condition, do something about it. Okay, don't be afraid to unplug. We know the research is really clear on the impact of social media on our mental health. I've got social media and I love it, but there are times where I'll be like, I'm feeling more anxious, my anxiety is creeping up at the moment, so I'm going to unplug from Instagram for a while, just to be a bit more centered and to have less messages coming in, or to have less people impacting me. Sometimes that's your only form of connection, particularly during COVID, if you guys are locked down or anything like that, and that's how you stay connected. But don't be afraid to unplug. Don't be afraid to take some time out. My number one self-care tool I do to maintain my mental health now, well, number one is to remain connected. Number two is to spend some time in nature. Why? Because I can chill the heck out. There's no one else around me, no one else like wanting anything from me. There's nothing else I'm tuning into and being sympathetic or empathetic to. It's just me, nature and God, and I can just zen. So find that thing for you that's zen, whether it's sport, music, a jigsaw puzzle, cooking, singing, whatever it is that can kind of give you that mental break, that mental circuit breaker. Find something that does that for you. Does anyone have an idea of what that is for them already? You might not have labelled it that before, but yeah.
For me, it's like it's anything where it's sort of a repetitive thing that you can do over and over again. A good example is like lifting weights or exercising. It's good because it's not something that you can just do once. You can only do it once. You can do it again and again, and you just get lost in the rhythm, and that really helps.
Yeah, totally. Any other things that people know that, yeah? Playing sport, absolutely. Team sport, then you're getting the connection and the endorphins and like a bit of a break. Anything else? Anyone like painting? Yeah, a few artists in the room. How good, right? Well, depending how much of a perfectionist you are, but it's good. And look after yourself. You're worth it, right? You are the only person who is guaranteed to be with you every day of your life. So sometimes if you're someone who is very empathetic, you can spend your life caring for others and neglect yourself. Make sure you're looking after yourself and taking care of yourself really well. Okay. That's all that I have that I want to offer you guys. But we've got time, we've got 5 minutes now in here for questions, and I'll also stay back a bit later if anyone wants to ask something that they don't want to ask publicly. But any questions, anything you want to clarify, anything that didn't make sense or you felt like wasn't said? Yeah.
This is a bit of like, not a silly question, but like, it might be a bit obvious to others, but I was never told. Could you please clarify the difference between a mental illness and a mental condition?
Yes, so normally I do that, sorry.
Or a mental disability as well.
Yep. Okay, so mental illness, mental health conditions exactly the same. I have started using the term mental health conditions just because I think it brings it back into that health perspective, right? Illness comes out of there's a negative connotation to it. Particularly the nature of mental health conditions means sometimes they're around for a very long time. So if you're holding illness as part of your lived experience for a prolonged period, it can become a part of your identity that you really resent. Whereas for me, being like, yeah, depression and anxiety, mental health conditions I've experienced for over 20 years now, they don't have that same weight. So for me, it's just like they're the same thing. Mental health disabilities, that's where you are experiencing your mental health condition is affecting your life to such a degree that you can't function normally, you know. And the great thing about being able to call mental health conditions a disability when they get to that level in this country is that there's great support. You can get support on the NDIS now, and you can get some great free counselling and things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Is that like autism, Down syndrome?
They are not mental health conditions. They can come into disabilities, but not necessarily. Yeah, it's a tricky space, and that's not my field of expertise either. But yeah.
What would ADD be? Would that be a mental disorder?
No, that is it's a learning difficulty, or it can affect learning difficulties. Again, not my area of expertise. But yeah, it's more of a cognitive functioning. Yeah.
Any other questions?
No? Great. Thank you so much. Again, if you're feeling a bit whatever, you know, if you're worried about people and you're like, oh, I didn't realise they might be struggling, and during this I realised, oh, they are, or with you, then please feel free to have a chat to me, have a chat to your youth leader, your small group leader, and make sure you get some support. But the number one thing I want you to leave with is God's got your back in this. If you struggle, you've got a friend, a family member who's struggling, God's got this, okay? And press in. Mental health doesn't have to be devoid of God. It's a holistic journey to health between our spirituality, our physical health, emotional health, all of that. So keep God in the loop. Okay. Thanks so much, guys. Enjoy the rest of your conference.